The sky over Hive Helios-Astur splits along a line as fine as a scalpel. Workers on gantries freeze. A siren warbles and dies. The seam blooms white. Then desert hot air pours through a world built on steam and ash. An object tumbles out, human-sized, angular, trailing green glare like glass ground to dust. It clips a Vox mast, bounces across rusted corrugate, and slams into a stack of recycled drums. The drums burst. A pale chemical mist roars toward a shuttle platform crowded with Hab families. He stands, 50 years and some, shaved head, eyes that go still when they count. He tastes copper, dust, something sweet. He understands the mist before anyone else does. "Back!" he barks, already moving. He rips a safety placard from a railing and skids to the drums. His fingers flick the hazard glyphs, translating instinct to plan. Chloramine byproduct. Wrong scrub ratio. He looks for blue, the universal lie of industry, and finds it in cracked drums marked with a cog-toothed sigil. Caustic alkali. He wrenches a valve, kicks a lever, drowns the mist in a foaming rush that hisses a new smell. Safer, but not safe. He grabs a dockhand's coat and wraps it around his face. "Fans," he says. "Low, not high. Keep the plume on the deck." His hands draw an invisible diagram. If you vent up, you seed the whole hive. The dockmaster gapes, then snaps to. "Move! Deck fans to 1/4. The families crowd behind him. A child coughs and wheezes. He drops to one knee, pulls a torn strip of shirt from his sleeve, pours water from a canteen, and presses the cloth to the child's face. "Small breaths," he says. "In through the cloth. Count with me. Count." And the hive obeys. Fan blades grumble to life. The mist rolls and pools. The foam blankets it. The edge of the platform gives the cloud an exit. It slides over and down into the abyss of the lower habways. He stands very still. He listens to the chemistry finish. Then a second light opens. Not a seam. A wound. Blue fire blooms under the hive plates, and oxide grit rattles from the ceiling. A pilgrim points up, or down. It's hard to tell which direction matters when the sky bleeds. The man who fell lifts his eyes and meets a burning shape ascending from the underhive like a candle through a grave. And he knows, without theology or omen, that something is climbing to meet him. "Who in the throne's name are you?" the dockmaster whispers. The man answers, without looking away. "Heisenberg." A gunship knifes through smog and hovers. Heavy rotor wash hammering fumes into paste. Gold and black livery. Pallid saints etched along the prow. A woman leans out the side hatch. A crisp uniform. A scar that stops halfway to her mouth as if someone was interrupted. A voice like a clean ledger. "By authority of Governor Sabine Varro of Helios-Astur," she calls. "Drop your weapon and kneel." Walter looks at his hands. He has no weapon. He is holding a child's cloth. He sets it down. He kneels. A second figure appears behind the woman. Long coat in slate. Rosette of black enamel and red glass. Eyes that never blink in the same rhythm as others. The man's voice is softer and somehow heavier. "Ordo Hereticus. Inquisitor Malchai Voss. Tell me, Outlander, how did you just neutralize a chloramine event with a glance?" Walter glances at the drums. It wasn't a glance. It was a process. "Your cleaning agents are badly matched to your sanitizer." The Inquisitor watches the wound in the air rip wider. He does not look away when the first thing climbs out. A fist made of brass and shadow finds the gunship first. The pilot swears. The hull shrieks. Walter sees the creature's outline only in absence. Heat bent around it, light kneeling. A cultist choir howls from the lower stairs. The gunner swings a stubber on its pintle, and sparks fall into the abyss like starlings shot mid-flight. Walter runs. He is the only one moving toward the thing. He plans as he runs. Metal. Heat. Oxygen. Pressure. He sucks a breath through his sleeve, tastes the gunship's promethium, and catalogs each scent like a shelf of reagents. He yanks a pry bar from a locked panel, shatters a case, seizes 2 emergency canisters. He hurls one under the thing's stride. It stomps. The canister bursts. White dust leaps up and coats invisible sin. Magnesium-based suppressant. He clocks the rate of clumping. He smiles. He lights the other canister with the stolen flare and throws it low. It rolls under the magnesium cloud. The world turns sun. The thing staggers, shape cut into visible contour by incandescent dust. The gunner sees a target and empties a belt into the outline with righteous relief. It falls. The gunship claw feet bite harder onto the gantry until metal creaks like old teeth. The Inquisitor studies Walter as if the man is a slow-acting toxin. A useful heresy, he says. Governor, take him under guard. Alive, Governor Varro snaps. He saved 100 on this deck. Alive for now, Voss replies. Walter keeps counting. He has learned that counting is the only prayer that pays out. They drag him into the gunship. The pilot fights for clean air. The Hive recedes to a tangle of ribbon lights and cathedral buttresses. He sees the wound spreading. He knows wounds when he sees them. He knows where this is going. I need a lab, he says. You need a confession, Voss says. Sabine Varro pins Voss with a look that would uproot lesser men. You can have your confession after he helps us keep the Hive from tearing. Voss inclines his head a fraction. The fraction feels like a verdict deferred. The gunship banks toward the spire of administration, a tower that looks designed to hold up the idea of the city more than the city itself. On its parapets, soldiery in faded blue uniforms watch the wound, like it might drop a second sun. In the command chamber, hololiths shiver. Lines of heat. Population density maps. A sunken slate pool where astropaths sit with bandaged eyes and listen for screams only they can hear. Varro leads. Voss drifts like a shadow that has observed too much and would like to observe more. Walter squints at a live feed of the underhive. He sees symbols cut into the plates, curving arcs that intersect in ratios his code-slick brain reduces to a ring of numbers that shouldn't be on metal. How do you fight a hole? Governor Varro asks. You don't, Walter says. You cool it. Voss's eyebrow climbs by one dangerous degree. Explain. Walter points at the density map. Where your heat's thickest, your air curls in on itself. You're feeding the thing. It's drawing through your thermal gradients. Give me access to your scrubbers. I can vary the humidity and cool the seam. Not close it, but slow it. You think water solves warp, Voss says. I think physics makes a lot of liars into saints, Walter says. And I think you have 12 minutes before whatever is climbing finishes climbing. The governor's voice cuts. Do it. Walter moves. Consoles that did not expect these orders accept them anyway. He speaks a language of ratios with his hands. He learns the Hive's lungs faster than he has any right to. He dials the scrubbers to a staggered cadence. Humidity climbs. The seam smokes like a high-voltage line in a storm. It tightens. It does not close. The first wave changes shape. It comes not as a beast now, but as men. Dozens. Hundreds. Hab gear. Tattooed eyes. They throw ropes into the wound like a well and pull up knives that were not knives when they slipped down. Voices chant. Blue fire coils around wrists like pet snakes. At their head walks something that wears human outline like a polite insult. Feathers of glass. Armor the color of spilled ink over ice. Eyes hidden behind a helm, etched with equations that never finish. A staff that hums like the exact middle of music. Voss's jaw tightens. 1,000 suns, he says. Sorcerers of the Changer. Walter does not know the name. He understands the meaning. He sees the staff's head, a lattice of angles that seem to contradict each other and yet sit together without conflict. He feels it in his teeth. The lattice is hungry. The sorcerer raises his hand. The humid air in the chamber crisps into a brittle stillness. The hololith distorts. It is a very small thing, and a very big one. Walter's coffee, forgotten at his elbow, does not steam. The steam is not merely absent. The steam is impossible. Anti-entropy. Walter breathes. He's unbinding activation energy. He's turning the world into a bad lab. Varro points at the city map. They're moving toward the reactor basilica. Voss looks at Walter. Prove your thesis. Walter steps to a console and stabs at a vent map. We wrote cool air here, here, and here. We trick the lattice into caching itself. Then we set a trigger. The lattice can't decline. Which is? Walter looks at a live image of the reactor basilica. Stacks like organ pipes. Catwalks. A skull the size of a tram, carved in stone. Teeth worshipped by men who sharpened them with prayer. Heat, he says. A heat so local and temporary, the lattice does not see it until it's trapped. Varro taps the Vox. Colonel Mauer, shuttle a squad to the basilica. Bring a man with a promethium hose, 3 bulkheads worth of courage and faith. The colonel answers with the sound of boots moving faster. Voss watches Walter as one might watch a mirror that could suddenly show a different face. You will come, he says. I will, Walter says. Because your man with the hose will not know when to stop. They drop toward the basilica. War comes up to meet them. Cultists swarm the outer steps like ants that found a cake. The squad disembarks in a wedge. Bolters cough thunder. Red mist climbs the steps and drips back down like paint flung wrong. Colonel Mauer carries his hose the way a knight carries a lance. Walter runs with them. Smoke claws at his throat. He keeps his mouth closed and breathes through his nose, counting heartbeats to drown appetite's whisper. The basilica doors are open. That feels like an insult. They go in. Heat lives here. It lives in pipes and prayer. Servo skulls drift along the vault and whisper liturgies that are also maintenance schedules. The main hall is a canyon of brass. At its far end, the sorcerer stands on a platform above the regulation altar. He draws shapes in the air with his staff. The shapes stay. They hang like crystal cages around the reactor's heart. Mauer raises the hose. Walter slaps the nozzle down. Not yet, he says. You flood the room. You feed his equation. The sorcerer tilts his helm like a nod to a colleague he is about to ruin. Clever primate. A voice whispers in Walter's skull. Cook for me. Walter's vision warps at the edges. A lab bench appears in the corner of his eye. Stainless steel. Blue meteors bubbling in glass. A man's hands, his own, fit a respirator. A woman's voice hums from somewhere just outside the frame. He knows the voice. Memory is a solvent. It loosens what you kept under lock. He blinks hard and grabs Mauer's sleeve. Cover me, he says. For what? Mauer grunts. Doing something stupid. Walter sprints onto a lower platform. He pulls a cable from a junction, sparks like bees. He strips the insulation with his teeth. He ties one end around a rail and throws the other over a bracket. It arcs, chews, and finds a home a meter from the reactor's heat shroud. He opens a valve with a wheel that does not want to turn. His forearms knot. It turns. He turns to Mauer. Now, Promethium becomes a wall of sun. The sorcerer laughs, or the thing inside him does. Blue heat meets orange. The lattice snaps to drink, and suddenly finds itself webbed through by live copper and crude steel paths that do not honor its geometry. The anti-entropy gets busy with a problem no one asked it to solve, deactivating energy in exactly the place Walter chose. Walter hits a second valve. A shutter in the shroud flips. The reactor exhales a blast of coherent heat through a slit the size of a man's chest. It is a pulse of perfect temperature, uninteresting to the lattice until too late. The lattice takes it in like a perfectionist, taking on one more job and locks. Now, Walter says again. Mauer walks the Promethium band across the latticed air, like a painter laying a stroke. The frozen geometry sucks up the flame and sticks. The shapes warp. They crack. The sorcerer groans. The staff's note goes strange in Walter's ears. The thousand sun points the staff at Walter. The air around Walter becomes an argument against chemistry itself. His lungs forget how to trade. His veins feel like tubes filled with square marbles. He drops to his knees and claws for air that used to be a friend. Give in, the voice says. Sweeter now. The lab bench is closer. The respirator is a hand's reach away. Cook with me. We can make things that fix the unfixable. We can make time regret what it did to you. He sees a face, a boy's, tired eyes, a smile that forgave more than it should. He sees a woman at a sink. He sees a heap of money on a crawlspace floor, and the cold that came with it. Control tasted like sugar until it broke his teeth. No, he manages. The sorcerer's staff dips. Reality around Walter dips with it. He understands, through a strangled haze, how to hate an idea. The basilica's side door bursts inward. A woman in armor the color of a sanctified flame strides in. Fleur-de-lis burned into her pauldron. A power sword hums in her hand. Behind her walk sisters with eyes like lit incense. A cadre of robed women follow, bare heads gleaming, mouths hard, their very presence turning the air simple. The first woman points. "Canoness Miriam Hale," she says. "Sisters of battle, sisters of silence. On me, the world simplifies. The anti-entropy wine dims where the silent women stand. The sorcerer recoils, as if the floor has turned to a memory of drowning he thought well buried. Hale runs a bead of burning blue across the nearest cultist, without breaking pace. "Hold the shape," she says, as if Walter and Mauer are just another pair of weapons to put in the right spot. The silent sister closest to Walter kneels. Her aura is a vacuum for unhelpful dreams. The respirator's whisper fades. Walter breathes. The sorcerer snarls and throws a handful of eyes at them. Crystal insects with pupil centers that open like the throats of bells. They skitter along rails and pipes and begin to sing in small voices to the laws of motion. Hale cleaves the song. The eyes burst into salt. Voss appears at Walter's shoulder, coat smoking, rosette catching the light like judgment. "You survive temptations you recognize," he says softly. "Do you recognize this one?" Walter stands. He is shaking. He hates that Voss sees it. "I recognize being sold control," he says. "Good," Voss replies. "Hate it more." Together they pivot. Mauer lays fire where Walter points. Hale's sisters crack the circle. The silent sisters advance and drag reality like chain across the floor. The sorcerer steps back onto a sigil burned into the platform and laughs again. "You built a cage," he says through the helm. "We live in cages. Watch." He drives the staff's butt into the sigil. The basilica shivers. The reactor's hymn goes flat. The cage Walter made cracks from the inside. Not mechanically, morally. A wave of certainty breaks across the hall. That nothing they do matters because the story is already written. And in it, they lose. Walter hears his son's laugh dunked in tar. He tastes iron. He steps forward and puts 2 fingers on the live cable he hung. Pain writes its name down his arm like a signature. "We don't lose," he says. "Not if we keep changing the problem." He wrenches the cable off its bite and throws it to the left. It lands across a different bracket. The heat pulse strikes a new spot. The lattice darts like an anxious mind. It traps itself again, slightly less elegantly, slightly more desperate to be perfect. Hale nods and drives her sword in the half-beat. The sorcerer's certainty stumbles. The staff's lattice breaks. The basilica exhales a hotter, saner breath. The sorcerer staggers and finally looks down to find his own body where his mind had stretched. He glides backward, helm tilting again, calculation under disdain. "There is another you," he says, voice a slip of silk. He makes better choices. He steps into a gate that plucks itself out of the air with an exasperated sigh and vanishes. The cultists scatter as if the music stopped. The sisters clean up the bars of the score. Later, in the council chamber, Governor Varro pours water for Walter with her own hand. She does not smile. She does not blink too often. She speaks like a commander who will be quoted when she dies. "You saved a city quarter," she says. "Perhaps the city. I bought you time," Walter says. "A wound like that is an invitation," Voss finishes. He plants a palm on the table and leans. The changer of ways rarely sends one emissary when 2 will do. "What does he want?" Walter asks. "What you want," Voss says. A neat story, where all the numbers add. And then, a hand on the dial. Varro's gaze scans the hololiths, as if she can check off items on a list that contains reality. We organize a perimeter around the wound, she says. We move civilians. We dig the sorcerer out if he returns. Voss's look holds Walter. We also contain you. Walter meets it. If you put me in a box, you waste what just saved your basilica. Voss opens a palm to the governor. Observe the heresy. Observe the results, Varro says. Voss's mouth makes a small movement that might one day grow into a smile if fed cruelty and restraint. You have the Inquisition's gratitude, he says to Walter. It tastes like iron and comes with chains. He taps a data slate, and a seal blossoms on it like a black rose. By my writ, you are consigned to protective custody. Until judgment. Varro does not argue. She looks like a woman who has counted the rounds in her sidearm and in her city, and found one short. The alarm cuts across the room. Not a siren, a chant that failed. The astropath choir stiffens. One swallows a scream and bleeds from both eyes. Translation, a tech adept croaks. Primary void edge, something big. Walter's hands go cold. He does not know how to read ship runes, but he knows an escalation curve when it winks at him. The hololith shows a vessel like a long sin with a spine. A Baroque dagger, gilded in a color that thinks it is blue, but might be peacock if you catch it in the wrong light. Pensile towers studded with glyphs. The prow mouth opens, and the taste of old static floods the channel. The ship names itself with no sound. The Optimum. Voss's eyelids half close. We just survived a scholar, he says. Now we receive a salesman. The Optimum vomits smaller craft. Shapes like scalpels thrown edgewise. They do not fly straight, and that is the worst thing about them. They move as if they have found a shorter distance between 2 points than the line you were taught. Strike teams puncture the hive at evenly spaced points, like a well-planned injection. Their leader lands at the spire's base and walks up the storm stairs alone. Walter watches through a servo skull's eye, while Medicae wrap his burned palm. The man on the stairs is not armored, though armor would not look wrong on him. He is in a coat like Walter's once. He has a hat with a low brim. He walks like he weighed the alternatives and found gravity negotiable. Walter breathes only twice for a very long time. The man looks up toward the skull cam. He cannot see it. He looks anyway. The brim hides his eyes, and then a gust lifts it, and Walter sees his own face. Not a twin, not a copy. A selection. The jaw is harder. The mouth is a line that is proud of being a line. When he speaks, the hub vox picks it up. I am Heisen-Lord, the other Walter says. I have optimized outcomes. I am here to relieve you of your friction. Voss turns his head a few degrees. He studies Walter like a bomb you are considering learning to love. Mirror foe, he says. He has what you want. He has what I thought I wanted, Walter says. Varro gestures, and the spire's guard takes positions. Cannon on pintles, sanctified munitions, prayers on tongues. Hale's sisters redeploy like a story you request at the right moment for courage. Heisen-Lord walks until the storm stairs end, at a gate where 2 custodians stand. Statues, until they need to be. The man stops 5 paces back. He removes the hat. It is a hat Walter knows, and in this place, it looks like an artifact taken from a dead demigod. The mirror smiles a small, careful smile, the kind you make when you need to show that you own your teeth. I can fix your wound, he says. I can close it. Change your logic is just math. You wrap it in enough narrative, and people tithe to it. But math is persuasion and heat. Give me your lattice and your keys. Voss's voice glides down the stairwell like oil on clean steel. What do you take? The mirror's eyes find the vox source with lazy accuracy. Decisions, he says. You drown here in committees and saints. I offer speed. Varro's answer arrives like a stamped line on parchment. We pay blood for speed, she says. Our accounts are currently overdrawn. Heisen-Lord's eyes cut left. The camera jitters. It recognizes the gaze of a man who has measured cameras. This world will be taken from you, he says conversationally. I can take it in a way you survive. The custodian on the left lifts his guardian spear to a level that interrupts philosophy. The other mirror, Walter tips his hat back onto his head in one clean motion and steps away as if an invitation has been declined gracefully. Another day, he says. Another equation. He turns. He does not retreat. He reconsiders velocity and chooses a different answer. His strike teams leave the Hive with the same disrespect for straight lines. The Optimum peels away and slides toward the upper void. Voss watches it go with unsurprised distaste. The Changer sent you 2 gifts, he tells Walter. A hammer and a mirror. Mirrors cut worse, Walter says. They do, Voss agrees. And we have been ordered. Ordered what? Varro asks. Voss taps the rosette lightly with one finger. To bring him to judgment. They travel on an inquisitorial cruiser, whose name is a blank, written beautifully. The Sisters of Silence billet near Walter's cell, and the room at once feels like a place where the warp's whispers are discouraged by polite, suffocating company. Canoness Hale visits twice. The first time she prays silently, eyes closed, lips moving in a rhythm that makes Walter think of good lab practice. The second time, she speaks. You have a gift, she says. In other places we would call it saintly, if the vector were cleaner. I'm not a saint, Walter says. I know, she says, and there is no judgment in it, just a filed observation. Saints are inconvenient. You are useful. Sometimes these intersect. Rarely. Voss appears in the doorway like a hypothesis that always wants more data. We transition to the solar, he says. There may be intercept. There is. The Optimum returns, and this time it presents not a salesman, but a sermon. A message kicks through their augers and plays itself on every surface with a suggestion that feels like charm. Heisen-Lord fills the cell wall. He looks at Walter like a man in a window burns at a street lamp at 2 a.m. We can corroborate, he says. You know the trick. Find the yield, control the heat. Get the product. The Imperium hates that idea. It prefers faith to control. It is afraid of the right answer. Come with me. Walter steps closer to the projection. He does not want to. The wanting is a vector applied. What did you pay? He asks. The same coin you did, Heisen-Lord says. I told the truth about why I did what I did. I liked being the one with his hand on the dial. I said it out loud, and the universe paid me in kind. Walter is quiet for a long breath. And the people around you? Optimal, the mirror says. No one suffers needlessly. No one moves without purpose. They have agency inside my plan. Walter's burned hand contracts. Pain is honest. He is grateful for that. Your plan is a jail, he says. The mirror tilts his head. You lived in one, he says gently. You built one. This one saves more. A custodian steps into the frame. The projection warps and dies, stripped away by a null pulse that makes the skin on Walter's arms pebble. To the throne, the custodian says. His voice is the voice of a bell rung far away. It makes the cell feel smaller and somehow safe. They descend to a planet that is more a fortress than a world. Walls like mountains, spires like spears threatening heaven itself. The Imperial Palace rises like history decided to become a building. Golden giants guard gates that have never been opened to an uninvited guest. The air smells like oil and incense and iron will. They take Walter through halls whose ceilings remember the stars better than the sky outside them. They pass through fields of silence where thoughts go to be weighed. They enter a chamber whose floor is old and polished with the passage of decisions. At the far end, Light sits on a throne. He does not see a face. He sees a fact. The fact looks back, and Walter's knees decide they like the floor. The conversation does not use words at first. It uses the taste of promises kept and broken. It uses the weight of names. It uses the shape of choices that looked small and made rooms. A voice arrives after that. His own, and not. Speaking without sound. It lays 3 paths in his head like chemical options on a bench. Return. He sees a lab. He sees blood on a floor that had been cleaned well. He sees himself there again, coughing, heart laboring, the sound of sirens outside a life that had already finished. He would go back. The universe would tidy behind him. Memory would varnish. The lesson would become a good story told badly. Free agent. He sees himself on the Optimum, or something like it, walking stairs alone, solving problems perfectly. He sees the hive cities that would stand that would have fallen. He sees the secretary of a governor writing a speech that sings too smoothly. He sees the schisms. He sees the riots when results demand consent. He sees Voss's eyes narrowing over a ledger of souls. Sanctioned Servant. He sees chains. They are beautifully made. He sees a table with vials. He sees a badge that could buy him obedience he is not owed. He sees Hale's sword in its sheath and knows what it means when it comes out. He sees work and limits and the terrible grace of having someone say no to you. He tries to argue. The light lets him. It does not argue back. It simply does not blink. He thinks of the child on the dock, breathing through cloth. He thinks of the reactor's poem, returning to the right key. He thinks of being sold control and the cost of addiction disguised as competence. When I break rules, he says in the stroke of thought that could be a prayer, people die. When I obey the wrong ones, they die quieter. I need rules. I don't write. The light does not nod. It changes temperature. The room gets warmer with the kind of heat that forgives calamities if they are followed by humility. He breathes out. I'll take your badge, he says, but I want a condition. Conditions are chemistry. They change outcomes without changing inputs. The light understands. Walter sees the clause write itself. Mercy first. If 2 options save the same number and 1 spares a child, choose it. If a purge is demanded, argue to the last syllable unless delaying breaks the world. Always present alternatives. Never cook without telling the room what the fumes do. The light accepts. He does not feel forgiven. He feels employed. They dress him in a coat that breathes and does not burn easily. He receives a rosette edged in cobalt glass. The glass throws a small blue halo on the Inquisition's red. On the inner face of the rosette, hidden from others, a tiny Coggan brim sigil has been etched. A circle with tooth and a simple hat line. Not a boast, but a reminder. A sister of silence binds a thin torque around his wrist. It hums when thoughts stray toward bargains. Voss steps closer. He is an honest man in a trade that encourages performance. He studies Walter and sees a tool and a cost. Sanctioned, he says quietly, under my writ. Not a weapon, not a friend. Something between. Something that saves lives, Walter says. On my ledger, Voss replies, and hers. He nods toward Hale, who sets a small reliquary on the table. Inside, a flake of ceramite scorched blue. The sisters sign for a quiet miracle. They leave the palace. They return to Helios-Astur with fewer illusions and more paperwork. The wound still troubles the sky, but the edges seem ashamed. Walter walks the spire with Hale and Varro. He points. He explains. They listen. He stops a purge and orders an evacuation instead. He seals a duct and opens a door. He speaks to men with flamers and women with clipboards and makes them feel like parts in a machine that runs on hope and procedure. Heisen-Lord watches from a screen across a sector. He tips his hat and does not smile this time. He orders his ship angled toward another world to make a test there. The Optimum's engines purr in a key that makes certain men think of thrift and other men think of doom. Sorcerer Khemrith stands in a sanctuary made of mistakes. He holds a new staff grown from the spine of a priest who celebrated a liturgy backward until it fit. He weaves a lattice tighter and prizes his failure. He whispers to a pattern that ate a man once and asks it to please be patient. Governor Varro signs a decree that makes labor safer in the lower hives. The decree survives 3 assassination attempts and becomes policy. because Hale stands next to the clerk, who files it, and looks at anyone who coughs. Inquisitor Voss writes a report that will be read by a person who has not seen the sun in a decade. The report is neat. The report is exact. It admits what it must and hides what it can. It concludes with a sentence that is not his style. Mercy is a form of control when used precisely. Walter stands on the same dock where he arrived. He holds the cloth the child breathed through. It has been laundered and kept anyway. He looks up. The seam is smaller. It makes the sky honest. He remembers a lab and a death and a promise he should not have made when he did. He whispers something to himself, not an admission, not a vow, a protocol. The rosette on his chest glints red with a halo of blue. The symbol belongs to a machine that grinds men. The halo suggests that in the grinding, some edges will be beveled instead of broken. Down in the abyss, workers cough and keep working. Up in the spire, Varro signs another order. On a different stair, Heisen-Lord pauses because he's not sure whether he missed an assumption. In a chapel, Hale sheathes her sword and removes her gauntlets and lights a candle that is not asking for anything. Above them all, a light on a throne does not sleep. It pays attention. It adds a name to a list that matters. And next to the name, it writes a small note. Only it will read. Will argue. Useful. Keep under watch. Across the sector, Vox channels murmur. Rogue traders wager on how long a man from nowhere lasts in the angles of the Imperium. A Magos biologist petitions for access to his brain and is told no in 6 languages. A warband laughs and vows to make chemistry bleed. The Eldar hear a rumor about a mortal who learned to say no to a god's tone and frown the way old cousins do when a family story takes a turn. The Hive's dawn runs late and then arrives anyway. A bilge of fog drifts and shines where the seam leaked night. The day finds men at work and women at prayer, and a man in a coat with a torque on his wrist, sketching a diagram in the air with a finger and making a complicated thing simple long enough to save someone. Heisen-Lord breaks a line on his chart and redraws it. It hurts him a little to do so. He accepts pain if it improves the model. Noted, he says to no one. We iterate. Sorcerer Khemrith unwraps a shard that is not glass and promises it a city. Inquisitor Voss assigns a scribe. Canoness Hale orders more water for the medikey. Governor Varro affixes an official seal to mercy and makes it law for 1 more day. Walter folds the cloth, puts it away, and walks toward the next reaction. He does not feel clean. He feels correct. It is not the same. It will have to be enough. The sky's scar narrows and shines like a healed cut, thin and a little fierce. People who never look up and notice that someone did something. They go about their day with a new story to tell. It is not a perfect story. It has edges. It fits. In a dead solar, where plants admire their own reflections, a god considers a human and smiles with interest and not contempt. A smile like that is a weather front. It promises storms. On Helios-Astur, a badge catches sunlight and answers with red touched by blue. A compromise, a warning, a sign. He is Walter. He cooks, but not the old product. Not anymore. The Hive breathes. The war continues. The ledger changes by a line, and somewhere very far and very near, someone knocks. The door does not open. Not yet. Night pretends to fall on Helios-Astur, but the Hive lights forget to dim. Walter stands at a console in the spire, looking at a city as if it were a single patient with very complicated lungs. He adjusts scrubber cadence by fractions. The torque on his wrist hums when his thoughts stray into loops. He stops them with a breath and a count. A knock comes at the steel door. 3 taps, evenly spaced, polite and impatient. Voss opens it. A Magos Logos rolls in on spider legs, red robes rustling like someone found a way to make silk mechanical. Half his face is metal. The other half tries not to be offended by it. Palamedes, Voss says. Correct, the Magos answers, voice harmonic between man and cant. Your sanctioned asset modifies my reactors without submitting Form 17C. Your sanctioned asset also saved your basilica. These are incompatible conditions. Request: negotiate a new rulebook. Walter wipes residue off his burned palm with a clean cloth. You want me to write forms? I want you to write constraints, Palamedes says. Constraints prevent suboptimal saints. Varro steps in, cloak clipped back for speed, hair pulled tight like an oath. You can have your paperwork, she says, but not tonight. The Underhive waterworks are running dirty. Palamedes' lenses iris wider. Define dirty. Varro points at an overlay. Cholera rates spike without a source. The water is clear. The filters read compliant. People still die. Walter leans over the display. He zooms into the lines where aqueducts snake like veins through drowned arcologies. He sees the symbols again, curved and intersecting, ratioed wrong for pipework, and precisely right for a song. Not bacteria, he says. Pattern. Voss folds his arms. You think geometry sickens people. I think someone taught the water a hymn, Walter says. The throat is where you taste it. Hale enters with boots still wet. She does not apologize for tracking in other people's blood. The under-abbess at the basilica reports pilgrims drinking from sacramental troughs. Their eyes glaze. They repeat nonsense that is not nonsense. Then they sleep. Some do not wake. Others wake improved until they break. Palamedes purrs a string of binaric across a private link, and then translates it for the room. Sorcerer Khemrith wrote code into the flow. Clever. Vile. Very changer. The code is a lattice, Walter says. It collects coincidence until it becomes law, and then taxes souls as payment. Voss's eyes flick to the torque. Conceptual attacks are the ones that get a man like you. I know, Walter says. So we build an anti-him. Palamedes emits a pleased click. Proceed. Walter sketches on the air with his finger. He pulls variables out of a short layer of steam on the console and bends them. We seed the aqueducts with an adsorbent that binds the pattern. A glass, doped with something that likes blue energy and eats it. Likes, Hale says, as if testing the word with a sword's edge. And eats. Walter looks at her. You brought me in because I don't talk like a priest. I brought you in because you count, Hale says. Make me a count I can defend to men who only trust fire. Walter nods. It will require silica. Pure. It will require cobalt. Blessed cobalt, if that makes you feel better about it. It will require distribution at shelf speed. He looks down at the hive like a field of mouths. And it requires song. To overwrite a song, you sing louder or better. I can't sing louder. You and your sisters can sing cleaner. Hale glances at the silent sister in her shadow. The woman looks at nothing and makes the room feel honest. We can hold nodes, Hale says. We can make spaces where songs go to die. Palamedes hums. I can print the glass. The doping will be imperfect. Imperfection sometimes offends gods. They notice. We must rely on quickness. Then we run, Varro says. We set up injection points along the aqueduct. We flood the pattern with blue glass. We park sisters at convergences. We teach the city to forget a melody. Voss taps the edge of the console with one knuckle. Enemy reaction? Palamedes flicks a mechadendrite like a pointing finger. Sorcerer Khemrith will try to reverse the sign. He will build a null lattice. He will steal a silent sister if he can. Hale's jaw hardens. He will not. He will try, Palamedes replies without heat. We must pre-accept the attempt and injure it before it learns to walk. Varro turns to Walter. Tell me what you need at the waterworks. 2 squads with flamers for when I am wrong, Walter says. 3 medikey carts, because I will be wrong somewhere. Hale's sisters at the nodes. Palamedes' blue glass loaded in canisters that fit into civic access ports. Voss lifts his rosette. And inquisitorial writ to make anyone who says no, say yes. Make them say yes politely, Walter says. Polite coercion is a conclave specialty, Voss says. They move. Strike teams ride trams that groan, then obey. The underhive waterworks smell like stone sweating. Pipes pulse in regular beats that have been regular for longer than anyone remembers. Servo skulls whisper static prayers that have been static since their servos were new. The aqueducts sing their terrible hymn with no words. Walter kneels at an access manifold. Palamedes' drones clatter forward like obedient crabs and slot a canister into a throat. Walter twists a valve. He hears new song join old. It is not louder. It is cunning. It pauses where the other surges. It hums when the other gasps. It threads itself through. He watches a display count down from 1 to none. He wishes he were a man who prayed without preconditions and finds that he cannot. So he counts. The pattern fights. In the first slum, the hymn coils, turns its face, and smiles like a sickness that learned your name. 3 children vomit blue glass as a lace and breathe. One does not. Hale lifts him. She passes him to a medicae, who takes him as if God might be watching. At the second node, the pipes begin to whisper with a voice that is not a voice. Walter hears a lab bench again. The respirator again. He sees a bag of money evaporate. He hears Heisen-Lord's steps on the cheap wood of a staircase in his memory. The torque hums violent. A silent sister steps into his peripheral vision. The respirator dissolves like sugar in hot tea. Walter blows out a breath. He keeps working. At the third, they arrive to find a door open that should be closed. 2 sisters lie on the floor. Their eyes are open and cloudy. They are not dead. They look at nothing. Their presence pulls the world flat where they lie, like weights on a tablecloth. A lattice glows above them. Lines like cracked ice, humming a pitch no one with a pulse should hear. Khemrith stands within it, staff describing a steady circle. He looks like a book you misshelved, and only find when you need precisely that page. Borrowing nulls, he says affably. We needed an anchor. They give me their absence. I make it negative. I make it mine. Hale glides between heartbeats and is suddenly cutting. Her blade bites the edge of the lattice and scrapes like a violin played with gloves. Sparks that are not sparks skip along the shape. Khemrith flicks his staff and the room staggers as if bad weather just arrived through the floor. Walter sees the equation. It is beautiful. The way a gun is beautiful when you love it wrong. He sees the term where Khemrith inverted a silent sister. He sees the power that buys. He also sees the cost. The cashed-out debt sits in the air like a smell. It smells like children who have not learned letters, sleeping forever. Blue glass, he says. Now, Palamedes' drone discharges the canister into the lattice. The glass pours up like a reversed fall and threads itself where the geometry flexes. The humming drops a fraction. Khemrith's helm tilts. Intriguing, he says. An accountant with fire. Walter steps toward the lattice. The torque stabs his wrist. He ignores it. He puts his palm on a glass line. Pain tears a neat signature down his hand again, honoring prior work. He pushes current between the lines like a man teasing a knot. He watches the shape become more complicated. The more complicated it becomes, the less it likes itself. Complicated, he says. Make the lattice hate the mirror. Hale cuts again. This time not at the obvious bar, but at a support that doesn't look like one unless you love diagrams. The shape stutters. One silent sister shudders. Her thoughtless eyes blink. Once, as if marking a place, Hale steps to her, wraps an arm, and drags her out as if performing a sacrament none of the books describe. The other sister remains inside. Khemrith smiles in a way that promises a thesis. Trade, he says. You can have one. The other Dewit becomes mine. Heisen-Lord arrives as a shadow on a wall, and then as a man. No gunfire announces him. He has no need to announce. He leans against a pillar, hat brim low, not a speck of rust on his boots. You take deals from the changer? He asks the sorcerer mildly. We could work together. Your pattern, my efficiency. I prefer the laboratory, Khemrith says. You prefer the market. Walter's hand is still on the lattice. The torque hums. The hum changes when Heisen-Lord speaks. It becomes a single sustained note of pity. He hates the feeling and the accuracy that comes with it. Heisen-Lord looks at him. "You can save them both if you let me run the plant," he says. "You pick the paragraph on the decree. I pick everything else. We make rules that look like mercy and behave like execution. People live. Numbers sing. You get to stop counting one day." Voss's voice arrives on a speaker like a letter slipped under a door. "Don't listen." "I hear you," Heisen-Lord says, amused. "You prefer bad results, made lazily, to good results, made cleanly. It's a type of piety." Hale's blade carves a line like someone correcting a ledger, filled in with wrong numbers on purpose. The Silent Sister's fingers twitch. Khemrith frowns, charmed by the puzzle and annoyed by the uninvited hand in his pocket. Walter thinks of control like a drug. He thinks of being sold perfect graphs. He thinks of being offered clean death to avoid messy life. He hates that the offer makes his chest looser. He hates that he can name the feeling and want it anyway. He looks at the second Silent Sister. He sees the place in the lattice where Khemrith inverted her. He sees the hinge. He needs heat. He has none. He has a body. Bodies make heat if asked poorly. He pulls his hand off the glass. He steps into the lattice. Hale's eyes go sharp. "No, hold it," Walter says. He puts his burned palm on the hinge. He presses his other hand against the sister's shoulder. He thinks of heat in a reactor. Precise, fast, gone. He thinks of pain as honest. He thinks of the cost as prepaid. He opens every gate in his body and empties temperature into a point. Khemrith's staff dips. "Bold," he says. "Stupid," Heisen-Lord says. And for the first time his tone contains something like fear. Not for Walter. For the plan. The hinge loosens. The lattice tries to drink. And this time it drinks a source that moves too quickly to trap. The shape argues with itself and begins to prefer nothing. The sister gasps. She falls forward. Hale drags her free. The lattice collapses around Walter like a wet tent and then snaps back like teeth. Hale grabs him, but the world tears sideways. The torque screams. The hum turns into a shriek and then a relief so sudden it is like a hole. Walter drops onto cold metal somewhere else. He hits with the breath left. He rolls and makes his hands find a rail. He looks up. The room is glass and light and lies. The Optimum's interior does not show pipes or rivets. It shows how a ship wishes to be seen if it wants to happen faster. Heisen-Lord stands 3 paces away. The hat sits on a peg as an act of courtesy to the place. He looks tired only in the eyes. Everything else is an advertisement for sleep you do not need. "You jumped into a lattice," he says. "I was going to pull you out even if it scalded my palm. I didn't need to. He did it for me. That tells you something about him." Walter's throat tastes like copper touched with mint. He looks at the man who is not him. "What does it tell me?" "That he wants you in play," Heisen-Lord says. "He thinks you're a variable that breaks the experiment. He wants to watch you move so he can build a cage that fits. Join me." And we deny him that pleasant evening. Walter uses the rail to stand. The floor is still there. He appreciates stability. He looks at the big view. The hive is a laced glow under a veil of smoke. The wound is a bruise in the sky. His hand shakes. He does not like that Heisen-Lord lets him see it. He likes worse that the mirror pretends not to notice. "You want me," Walter says. "I want your constraint," Heisen-Lord answers. "You cut me at the throne. You said yes to a leash. You made it respectable to refuse me. That injures me. I adapt. Your adaptation looks like me," Walter says. "Cleaner. Without the shame," Heisen-Lord says, almost kind. "We solve things. We log the harms. We keep people breathing. I take your torque off. You won't hear songs. Not mine. Not his." Walter reaches for the torque and stops his hand with the other one. The habit of wanting rid of the hum makes the hum earn its pay. "And Governor Varro? I let her govern," Heisen-Lord says. "Inside a frame. People like frames. They admire you when you put pictures in them for them. And Voss? Walter asks. Voss can audit, Heisen-Lord says. He will write very stern notes. I will not read them. Hale's voice punches through the ship like a prayer with a rivet gun. It is not sound. It is pressure. It is refusal. It is love of a thing she will not name, arriving as a blade in a joined pair of hands. The Optimum's walls flicker. Walter feels the null not as absence, but as relief, like air returning after a long unkindness. Heisen-Lord puts his hat back on with a small, necessary motion. Divine signs are cheap, he says. We will talk again. Walter answers by stepping toward him. Heisen-Lord pivots back a half step. Tiny, elegant, an old habit that keeps you alive in rooms where small things become shrapnel. He lifts a hand. As you like. The world folds. Walter falls with gravity that has decided to introduce itself all at once. Hale catches him on the waterworks floor without drama. She does not say anything about how much he weighs. The two silent sisters stand upright. Their faces are empty the way icons are, all absence and meaning. They tilt their heads in not quite gratitude. Voss watches from a distance. He writes something in a small book and does not show anyone. Don't do that again, Hale says. I won't promise, Walter says. But I heard you. They hold the nodes. The blue glass runs. The hymn loses measures. It collapses into a hum that fits inside pipes without taking up human throats. People drink. They stop dying at that speed. Some still die. The ledger moves. War goes on. Varro signs an order. The Underhive obtains more water. She burns the wax on the decree herself instead of a clerk doing it for her. No one says the word miracle. They say throughput. Khemrith retreats to a sanctum that is less clean than his preferences. The mirror lattice sits in the corner and sulks. He strokes it as a man might stroke a dog that bit him, puzzled and indulgent. He injured you by making you want to be a better story, he says. We will not forgive. Heisen-Lord stares at a plot of outcomes and takes a single line out. He cannot abide ugly curves. He puts in a smoother one. It will cost more men in the lower hives and fewer in the upper. He can live with that distribution. He calls it optimal. Walter sleeps an hour in a chair. He wakes with breath held and forced out carefully. He writes a list. He crosses off 3 things you cannot accomplish in this world without simply killing more people. He circles 2 that might work anyway. He carries the list to Voss. The Inquisitor reads it without commentary. He finds the line in the middle that is not chemistry and taps it. You want a deputized inspectors guild, he says. Civic, empowered by writ and oath, answerable to me and the governor. We can't be everywhere, Walter says. But we can make people who want to be good at valves matter. Voss's mouth twitches. We do not make stability with guilds. We make it with fear. Then fear me a little, Walter says. Fear that I will make you justify your purges. Varro enters. She takes the list. She nods once. Do it, she says to Voss. Because if you don't, Heisen-Lord will build it without you and call it a ministry. Voss looks at the light on his rosette. He places it on top of the list like a paperweight. Deputize, he says. They recruit. They find men and women who know which way to turn a wheel before reading the paint. They find boys who hate broken pumps because they slept next to one their whole childhood, and it kept time for their hunger. They swear them on a copy of a manual, and a relic of a saint, and a ledger that Voss will keep. They hand them wands that test the smell of air like an honest nose. They hand them a badge shaped like a smaller version of Walter's rosette. Red ring, thin blue halo. They call them regulators because the Hive respects machines more than it respects men. The regulators love that. Heisen-Lord watches the ceremony on a grainy feed and tilts his head. He recognizes the move. He wishes he had thought of it sooner. He sends pamphlets into the lower hives, printed on cheap paper, with clever ink. The pamphlets teach people to optimize their lives. They look like civic guidance. They're a schematic for obedience to the best available plan. People read. They like the feeling of following a line with fewer sharp turns. Khemrith picks through corpses from a cult cell and finds one silent sister's braid. He uses it to tie 3 equations together that should not be tied. He calls the knot gratitude and laughs into his helm for a very long time without making a sound. The next strike lands at the reactor basilica again, because some places learn a taste for violence the way a tongue learns a taste for salt. Palamedes warns first. Harmonic anomalies ripple through the core. The hymn slides toward flat again. Voss orders an evacuation. Hale orders penitent wards open to anyone who can carry a hose or a child, without asking first which a man can lift. Walter runs the catwalks. He holds a rod of blue glass as long as his arm. It warms with proximity to ideas. He knows where to put it because the math in his head likes right angles that hid inside curves. He hears Heisen-Lord's voice inside the main vox, polite and reasonable. "I can close the wound in 12 hours with a mortality profile below 5%, the mirror says. "I will require command of the basilica, the regulators, and the governor's voice. I will return them when the optimum is achieved. I will then ask to keep them, and you will say yes, because I will be right." Varro answers, breathy from running stairs 2 at a time beside her men. "You do not get my voice. You don't use it well enough," the mirror says. And for the first time he stops performing kindness and lets contempt show. Voss cuts the channel. "Offers made under siege are treason," he says. Hale looks at Walter. Her face is streaked with ash that does not show on armor. "You will say no now," she says, "and later you will think about saying yes. You will need someone to say no for you. This is the agreement. This is why you bear the rosette, and I bear the sword." "I know," Walter says. "Say it," Hale says, not unkindly. "I will say no to perfect," Walter says. "I will say yes to saving who I can." They reach the core. Khemrith stands on a bridge across the reactor like a suggestion of a man painted on glass. The staff's head has changed. The lattice is tighter, less arrogant, more brittle, lesson learned. He nods as if greeting a colleague whose work finally interests him. "This is where you break," he says. "Everyone breaks," Walter says. "It's leverage." He drives the blue glass rod into a slot he and Palamedes cut yesterday. It slides with the satisfying resistance of doing the right thing despite the bad noise. The rod hums. The hum finds other hums and harmonizes. The lattice hears and tries to change key. The rod follows. The lattice changes again. The rod follows. It becomes a rhythm like running downhill and not falling. Khemrith whips the staff sideways. The bridge buckles. The rod shakes. The reactor looms like a god without lips about to speak. Hale steps between Walter and the drop, because that is a place she believes is hers. Voss fires a bolt pistol one-handed downrange at a small symbol only he can see. He misses. He does not swear. He adjusts and fires again. The symbol chips. The lattice curses without language. Heisen-Lord appears at the far gantry. He has no teams behind him this time. He walks alone into flamelight and makes it look like he thought of flame while writing his schedule. He lifts his hands, palms out, and addresses them like an honest thief at a dinner. "We do business," he says. "We end this with a signature." Walter hears the reactor begin to ask uncomfortable questions about containment. He answers them with math shouted into the rod. He does not look at the mirror when he says, "No." The mirror's mouth makes the smallest shape that still counts as a smile. "You will one day," he says, almost gentle. "You will make me right, because the numbers will be bad enough." "Maybe," Walter says, "but not today." Khemrith slams the staff into the lattice and pulls. The reactor shrieks. The basilica feels like a chest with a heart too big for the ribs. Hale barks orders without looking. Sisters move like oil on water, finding and killing shine. Regulators curl their bodies around valves in positions that hurt to look at and twist. Palamedes' drones swarm the rod, add cooling, subtract friction, sing a machine hymn that is as ugly as it is useful. Walter counts. He counts the pulses. He finds a cycle. He rides it. He shoves the rod when the pulse dips and stops when it crests. He lives in that dip. He makes himself the dip. He thinks of lungs. He thinks of his son. He thinks of the lie that accomplishment equals absolution, and lets the lie go because it is heavy. Heisen-Lord watches and does not intervene. He studies. He learns the cadence of Walter's refusal. He is very, very good at learning. He sets it aside for later. The lattice snaps, not with drama, with resignation. The anti-him takes, because it is cheaper. The reactor calms one notch at a time. The basilica stops shaking like a horse choosing not to throw its rider. Khemrith's helm turns toward Heisen-Lord in a small, curated anger. "You did not optimize," he says. "You did not deserve it," the mirror says. Hale advances. Khemrith retreats into a geometry that flips like an insult read wrongly. He leaves a smear of music in the air that tastes like pennies and regret. Heisen-Lord tips his hat to Hale. It is a small motion that acknowledges a duel without drawing a blade. He tips it to Voss in ironic courtesy. He tips it to Walter last, slow. And then he is gone. Not by a gate, but by a decision. The Optimum pulls out of the gravity well and leaves a line in the sky that men will call contrail because it reassures them to name a phenomenon, something they know. The rod cools. Walter's hands shake and finally stop because they are empty. Hale clamps a gauntlet on his shoulder. The pressure is heavy and kind. Voss puts away his pistol with the deliberation of a man shelving an argument for later. Varro arrives an hour after and signs a decree on the basilica's altar. The decree formalizes the regulators. It mandates 2 options presented for any lethal measure. It requires a sister or a chaplain at any valve that kills more than it saves. It gives Voss veto with an appeal path that includes a woman who carries a sword and a man who counts. Palamedes stamps the decree with a cog seal and a line of code that makes it legal in ways normal men do not see. "Sufficient," he says, which is the Mechanicus's highest compliment. Haley lights a candle in a niche blackened by earlier fires. She does not pray out loud. She changes her breathing, and that seems sufficient. Khemrith gathers a council of scholars who sold their names and kept their hats. He tells them a story about a man who injures miracles by insisting on safety margins. They nod. They write. They will come for him later with traps that feel like choices. Heisen-Lord stands at the Optimum's window and watches the wound in the sky shrink by a hair. He hates that this happens without his signature. He accepts the hatred as signal. He rewrites the next plan. He puts Helios-Astur aside. He targets a pilgrim world with softer men and a governor who thinks optimization means obedience. He will be welcomed. He will close a wound and send a bill. He will keep the voice he has lent. The Hive begins to tell a new story about itself. It is not flattering. It likes that. It says, "We were dying ugly and now we die better." It says, "A man from nowhere taught us to argue before we burn." It says, "The Inquisitor agreed to listen, and when he did not, the woman with the sword made him." It says, "We have badges now. The badges have halos. The halos are blue. Children draw them in chalk on the stairs. They are not perfect circles." That is the best part. Walter sits on a parapet with his back against a wall that has seen 3 governors die at it. He breathes air that is trying to learn how to be air again. He watches a regulator teach a boy how to listen to a valve with his teeth. He hears the city settle 1 degree toward okay. He is tired in a way sleep cannot address. He does not look for a cure in a bottle or in a perfect graph. He runs a thumb over the rosette's edge and feels the tiny hidden cog and the thin, etched hat line in the blue. He smiles without liking himself for it. Voss joins him with 2 tin cups. The cups steam. The steam does not pretend it is anything else. He hands one over. "You were offered the world," he says conversationally. "I was offered a panic button," Walter says. "Same thing," Voss says. He sips. He looks at the wound like a man who has had worse scars and knows how they itch in weather. You embarrassed a chaos sorcerer and offended a man who thinks he is a nicer god. This ends with an attempt on your life, so grand it will get its own hymn. "I know," Walter says. You are remarkably calm, Voss says. Walter looks at the cup. He thinks of meth boiling and promises breaking, and a boy laughing. I broke the worst thing I made, he says. This is cleanup. Hale clanks up onto the parapet. She sits without removing armor, because to do so would admit fatigue. The governor wants a symbol, she says. People already have one. It should be the one on your chest. But the colors will confuse them. Let them be confused, Voss says. Confusion prevents idolaters from settling too quickly on a sin they like. Hale looks out at the city. We light a blue ring on the spire at shift change, she says. Thin. People will ask if we mispainted the red. They will be told that mercy sits inside authority. Some will grumble, some will sneer. Some will breathe easier without knowing why. This is faith. Walter nods. Do it. They do it. At the hour, the spire's top glows red as always. Inside the red, a thin band of blue burns with a temperature that promises nothing and keeps its word. Vox channels murmur. Priests write paragraphs. Traders commission pins. Children look up and decide that they like circles they can trace with their fingers against the night. In a palace, a light does not sleep. It notes the band and the man who asked for it. It notes the woman who insisted. It notes the man who allowed. It writes a line that says, "This symbol reduces purges by a small amount at great effort." The effort is worth it. In a warp sanctum, Khemrith's lattice plays a note that unnerves a demon which thought itself above simple fear. He applies to join a greater circle with a paper that glows when you lie and burns when you boast. He lies and boasts and burns and laughs. On the Optimum, Heisen-Lord takes a last look at Helios-Astur and tips his hat. But not in farewell, in deferral. He sets the ship's nose toward a world whose governor uses words like efficiency with his mouth full. The ship distorts the distance between 2 points. The shortcut looks like sorcery. It is math and hunger. On the parapet, Walter finishes his cup and sets it down carefully. He stands. Hale stands with him. Voss takes the cup and sets it to the side because he hates mess as a principle, not a preference. Next, Walter says, Varro's aid arrives at a run. Breath in neat packets. Governor requests your presence, he says. The Optimum has been sighted near Canticleer. The governor there is writing poetry to it. Travel, Voss says. Travel, Hale repeats. Walter looks at the blue halo on the spire. He touches the torque. It hums in friendly warning. He nods to the aide. He starts walking, faster than a man his age should on stairs that don't forgive. He hears a city behind him breathe. He hears a ship far away purr. He feels between his fingers the memory of glass that once blew. The war does not end. It iterates. He will iterate with it. He will refuse certain efficiencies. He will choose rules that injure his vanity. He will count until someone better takes the count. He hopes that someone never arrives, because then he loses the job that keeps him honest. The sky is almost clean when the gunship lifts. It is not a sign. It looks like one anyway. The city reaches shift change and lights the thin band again. Men below do not look up. Women below do. Children point. A song starts in a lower hab, tuneless and sincere. It is not an anti-hymn. It is not a laced conspiracy. It is stupid and human, and ends on a note that breaks and then repairs itself mid-voice because the singer decided to keep going. The Optimum drops into view near a different world. The glass in its windows reflects a thin blue ring it intends to cut out of the sky wherever it can. The man inside who wears Walter's face tilts his hat and calls a council. His hands are very clean. He likes them that way. Somewhere between them, a god smiles like a weather change that is not personal and will feel like it is. The ledger receives a new line. It is not as straight as the one above or below. That is the point. The universe makes room for crooked lines that save lives. Walter watches clouds peel off the gunship's nose. He counts to 10 without meaning to. He gets ready to count again. He thinks of a cloth a child breathed through, and the law he wrote on an altar, and the blue inside the red. He thinks of a hat on a peg. He thinks of a staff humming the wrong note. He thinks of a city that remembers one more valve to turn before it burns. He breathes in, he breathes out, he begins,